My kids have offered to get jobs, but they're not quite old enough, so that doesn't work. I'll do what it takes to make this work.
Thanks for joining me here in the trenches. Let me ask you, Chris, how did you get involved in this crazy MSP world?
Well, I really started when I was 18 years old. It's kind of a funny story. Was working for a copier company as I was going to college for IT, and I was going out to their customers and helping set up printers and scanning and that kind of thing on customer networks. And I remember, my first customer like it was yesterday. I went in their office, and the lady says, "Hey, our server's down right now. You'll have to come back another day." And I said, "Really? Like, what's going on?" And she says, "Well, our hard drive failed, and she said it's like the fifth one this year." And I was kind of concerned because I was like, that's not normal. And she says, "Oh yeah, there's a box of them in the server room." So I went back there and I look at it, and they're all used hard drives. They all have stickers on them. They've all been used. And so I told her, I was like, I don't think this is the right plan. And so she's like, "Well, can you help me?" And I was like, "No, I really don't know anything about this. And I said, "But you probably should get you a new server." At the time, this is like 2005. Dell was kind of a big thing and had just kind of really hit big. And so I said, we just go on the Dell website and just order one. And she says, "Well, could you show me what to order?" I said, "Sure." So I showed her, click this processor, this memory, went down the list. She paid for it. I thought I was done. I left, told her, "Hey, once you get this all worked out, give me a call back and I'll fix your printing and stuff." And she calls me back in about a week and she says, "Hey, that server came in." And I was like, "Great, that's great." And she says, "It's still in the box. Could you come out and install it for us?" And I told her, I said, "Hey, it's not really my thing. Haven't done that before." And she's like, "I'm sure you could figure it out." And I said, "Okay, I'll give it a shot." So I went in on a Saturday. It was small business server 2003. I hated it, but I did it. I set it up from scratch. Luckily, it's very wizard oriented. And so I set it up, got their computer set up, got them joined to the domain, and set everything up. And it was all working. It was basically QuickBooks was their only application. And so, I was young. I was 18 years old. I didn't really have a lot of business or anything, any business sense. And the funny thing is, we got to the end of it, and she says, "Well, what do I owe you?" And I'm a little naive, right? I was like, 200 bucks would be fine. And she goes, "Okay, no problem." And so she walks to the back, and she comes out, with cash, and she hands me $1,200. And she's like, "You earned it." And I was like, "Wait, this is way too much." And she says, "No, you earned it." And so I was like, "Okay." So I left out of there happy as I ever been. And I was like, this could be a thing. This is pretty cool. And so it just kind of started from there. Once I took her on as a client, started the company and got some other clients and same kind of thing. Started a managed service provider in 2007, so not long after, and just kind of went from there.
Outstanding. And now, the way I remember your story is that is not the MSP that we see on your shirt right there.
Yeah, so that was a
Whatever happened with that
couple.
MSP?
Yeah, so that was a couple MSPs ago. So I started that MSP in 2007. I ended up selling it to a copier company in 2012, and I went to work for them. And I've been there for the last almost 13 years. And then I just recently left that position and started IronGate MSP.
All right. Well, then that okay. You're just no judgment. You're a younger guy. You're younger than me. You're younger than a lot of owners out there. What tells you this is the right time to start another MSP?
Well, I mean, I've been in this industry obviously since I was 18, so it's all I really know. And I've worked for clients and I've supported clients since I was 18 years old. Unfortunately, things just didn't work out with the company I was working at, and so for me, it just felt like the obvious thing to do. Right? It's what I do. It's what I've known, and I just felt like it was time to get back to being an owner and being able to make decisions and and not have to answer to anyone else for those decisions.
Okay. So really is kind of more about kind of what you want to do, what you feel comfortable doing, what you think you'll have the highest probability of success, than it is you saying there is a need in the market for me.
Well, I think
Or
there's
is it?
always a need, right? I
Is
mean,
there?
I think the market's, my personal opinion is the market's very flooded, but, I still get calls on the regular of, hey, we're not happy. This, we found out this wasn't being done. Our backups weren't being ran. So as long as those things are happening, there's still room for another one in the market, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, right on. All right. And as you went through this really uh, big moment, I won't say it's tough or not, but a big moment to say, I'm going to go start my own thing. How did that fly at home? What's kind of the family dynamic around? Yes, we trade W-2 payroll, safe paychecks for big risk, big reward opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a big challenge. My wife is very concerned. My kids have offered to get jobs, but they're not quite old enough, so that doesn't work.
That's sweet.
But it's one of those things. I mean, I you said it earlier. I'd like to think I'm still young. I'm 38 years old. So, I still have some time left, and I think that now's the time. I'd rather not wait until I'm closer to, 45 or 50 to do this. I'm still young enough. I don't mind getting on a ladder. I don't mind, you know, installing equipment, those kind of things. So, I'll do what it takes to make this work.
Hell yeah. So you really are going to start at that level of what does a client need? I'm going to do it.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Where do you see, a year from now? You personally, your business, where do you see what are we going to achieve in that first year?
Yeah, so first year, I mean, my goals are to have at least, 15 clients. I'd like to clear that, my goal would be to pass that $100,000 revenue mark. I think that's perfectly doable with the right clients. And so I'm targeting those specific clients right now.
So first 12 months, reach 100,000 in revenue. Is that what I heard you say?
That's right.
Okay. When you think back to your first round of this in 2007, obviously you're much wiser now. You have a different perspective on the world. Maybe compare and contrast the 2007 version of yourself with the 2025 version of yourself in terms of like planning, thinking where we might end up, that type of thought.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've got a lot more years under my belt at this point, and I feel a lot more comfortable with the planning stage. But at the same time, I jokingly say I've kind of went back to 2012 because, I'm back to doing those things that I was doing then, right? I was the single guy. I was doing it all. If customer needed it, that's what, I handled it. So, I would say that, the experience I have, I've been in an executive role for the last 12 years. That experience has definitely morphed me into what I am today and will definitely help me from the budgeting, P&L tracking, that kind of thing. 12 years ago when I had my own company, sure, I ran a monthly report to see, how I was doing, but that was about it. There was no planning, there was no thought process as to here's where I need to be or here's what I need to make. And I've been doing that for the last 12 years. So that experience will definitely help leading this new venture.
Okay. What really, I'm curious about you for sure, but I'm also kind of thinking about this larger conversation of all business owners. I'm gonna kind of press on this a little bit. A lot of MSPs that we work with that are in the kind of 1.5 million range. Many of them, if they're continuing to grow and thrive, they will say, I wish I would have. I wish I would have built a business plan. I wish I would have hired this as my first employee instead of that as my first employee. There's a long list of like, hey, just this 5, 7 years later, I wish I would have done something different.
Hmm.
You get to sit at this with, years of industry knowledge, executive experience to hopefully make that list of things you wish you had done not have to be. So are you, this is kind of an awkward question to phrase, but what are some of the pitfalls that you are actively planning to avoid given your very recent experience at a very well functioning MSP?
I think, sales. I think sales is the first thing that I think is important. Marketing as well. when I was my first company back in from 2007 to 2012, there was no marketing, there was no sales. I was the guy that was roaming around town and everybody knew me, and that was how I got the business. And I think word of mouth is important. It still works today. However, I think that you've got to have some kind of outreach, and you've got to go find those customers, and you've got to have a process. The and that's probably what I've learned in this most recent role is that you can't just show up and say, well, what's your problem? Okay, I fixed that. There's got to be more of a proposal process and what's included in the proposal, and the pricing's got to be right. So and sometimes you got to ask those questions, right? Those closing questions to say, how could we make this work, or what's it going to take to make this work, instead of just walking away and saying, well, I hope you like it.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, no doubt. And I think that is, I again been talking to MSP owners for a very long time now, and it took me probably a couple hundred MSPs listening to them say the same thing over and over to figure out why it just didn't strike me right. They would sit there, Chris, and they would say, "We built this company on word of mouth. We've never had to spend a dollar on sales and marketing because we just do a great job and business comes." And I was like, man, that the first 10 times I was like, man, that's awesome. Good for you. The 20th, 30th, 50th time I heard it, I was like, okay, cool. That's everybody, I guess. Everyone says that. By the time I heard it the 100th, 200th time, I was like, big fucking deal. That's everybody. That is a given. So I kind of established my own observation of anybody can get to $1 million. It's not an asshole. If you're not an asshole, you know a few people, you know a bunch of people. The value, that $1 million is a reflection of the value of the people you know and some of the people they know. So no shit, you're going to use word of mouth. Good for you. All that really means is you're not a dickhead. It doesn't mean you've done something amazing. It doesn't mean your service is this spectacular thing that no one else can do. So I say this to really support what you're saying. My observation is those folks that have that sentiment, which I want them to be proud. I don't want to take anything away from that. But yeah, that's why you're $1 million and not $2 million and not $3 million. And that's why you also say, I don't want to be $2 million. Okay, that's cool for you too, I guess. But those that really want to get to that million a lot quicker, or those that want to continue into the 2, 3, 5, 10, $12 million, they better figure out sales. And here you are on day 11 or whatever it is for you,
That's
saying,
right.
yep, I'm not going to fall into the sales trap.
Right.
All right,
That's
long
right.
way for me to nod my head and say, yes, I agree with you, Chris.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, right on. So how are you living that today?
So I've been marketing like crazy, cold emails. I've got some cool ideas that I think are going to be great for mailers. Doing social media marketing as well. That's going to get more personalized as we go, but right now I'm just using kind of a service that you can just kind of plug and play, and it just sends out stuff, just to have something there so that if someone hits the page, it's not empty and looks
Right.
like nobody's home. So doing those things right now. Now that I'm fully focused on this, I've got, I'm part of a leads group, and I've joined a local chamber in Celebration. So I'm very involved in that market. I love going over there. It's been really a blast, and learning about the town and learning about the people and the other companies there. And it's really about networking. Meeting people, telling them what you can do, and then waiting for that need to happen, but constantly reiterating that, like, hey, I'm here if you need me.
Okay, cool. So you're getting out in the community, you're meeting the right types of people. What are these cold emails? How are you determining who to send to and what to send?
So typically business owners, office managers, those kind of things. I'm looking for specific verticals like, medical, uh, dental, lawyers. I typically stay out of the real estate market, usually not a great market for MSPs. But, those typical high level, companies that always they rely on computers day in, day out, they need that support. And so I'm targeting those people.
Understood. And The emails, you're kind of, you've crafted a good email. You're saying, I'm going to blast out a bunch of them today, next week, whenever. How many are we sending out? I'm not here to give you advice or tell you if it's good or not. I'm just curious. So how many
Yeah,
are we sending out?
so I have already sent out about, I believe, like 15,000 so far. So I'm hitting the market pretty hard, initially. Open rates are pretty good. I got about a 40% open rate. So I'm just now kind of, cultivating those leads and sending them, so I basically have a 4-step email process that's over about 2 weeks. And then once that runs through, then I have just a bi-weekly kind of updates, like obviously I'm talking about Windows 10 expiration. I know we should be done with that, but we got a month left, and there's people that waited to the last minute. So I'm targeting that. That's one that literally just went out yesterday, and then I've got a follow up to that in 2 weeks, and then I'm talking about bad wireless networks and that kind of thing in the next follow up, because just trying to create content that resonate with people, and I'm hoping the plan is that email lands in their inbox and they're going, man, my Wi-Fi's having trouble right now, and that's what says I got to call this guy and see if he can help, and that's the plan.
Hell yeah. So you get that 40% open rate on that first 15,000. That gets you down to whatever that is, 6,000. People opened it. Are you looking at click-through rates as well?
Yes.
And any idea what kind of click-through rate we got on that?
Want to say it was like 20%. It was pretty good. Like the website's had a lot of visitors in the last 30 days.
So, and I believe that 20% is of the open rate, correct? Or is that of the total send?
It would be the no, it'd be the open rate. So only
Okay.
20% of what's been opened.
So now we've got 6,000 who opened, and we've got 1,200 who clicked. I'm envisioning this funnel getting real narrow to say, great, we got something here. What do you do with those 1,200?
So that's my next step. Can't reveal the exact thing, but I have a cool mailer that's going out. I've been thought through. I've been working on it for about 2 weeks now, and I think that it's definitely something that people will not throw away.
Okay. So then they get that. Sadly, with that kind of thing, we don't know that they got it unless they call us and say thank you. But we're going to send out a bunch of that mystery gift or thing. What else do we do with that, 1,200 people?
Yeah. So we wait a week and then we call them. We ask if they received our mailer.
All right, cool. There you go. And so you're really kind of whittling it down, always whittling it down to started with stranger. These people might be friends now.
That's right.
And what do you say on that call?
Well, I think, initially, I think the door openers just say, hey, we sent you something last week. Just want to make sure you got it. Hopefully they're going to say yes. And then that's going to lead on to, is there anything that we could do to help? Is there any, that kind of thing. Try to schedule an appointment. That's the goal.
Schedule the appointment. That's the objective. Okay. And that next step starts in probably in the next week or so, I imagine, where you mail it out. Okay. So when we think 3 or 4 weeks from now, how many appointments do you think we might land from all of that?
I'm hoping 5 to 6.
5 to 6. Okay. All right. Good. Well, we'll make sure to check in with you on that.
Great.
So let's stay on this sales topic a little bit. So now you've gotten that person to say, yeah, come in, we'll meet with you. What's kind of do you have a strategy that you employ in that first meeting setting?
Yeah, so obviously it's like a discovery meeting. We always ask questions, what are you currently doing? What kind of technology are you using? Who are you currently working with? That's not as important, but sometimes it clues us into what the problems they may be having are. And then, we offer some type of network assessment. That way we can actually see what's happening, what's going on. A lot of times these days, server infrastructure is offsite, not accessible. So it's more of just look at the closet, figure out what they have, talk to them through their problems, and then come back and build a proposal with that. And that proposal really needs to touch those key areas that they pointed out that they're having problems with. If I just slap a proposal and say, oh, well, it's $200 a user per month, there you go, that, you're going to get some, but most of them are going to turn and say, well, I got 10 proposals that say the same thing. So if I can say instead, here's my proposal, it's $200 per month per user per month, but then I'm going to cover this, and this key area that we talked about, and I'm going to make sure, hey, those internet issues you have, we're going to implement an SD-WAN appliance that takes care of all that with a secondary internet connection. And next thing you know, they're problem solved.
Are you going strictly for the managed service agreement? Are you doing some projects for folks that aren't ready to be managed service clients? What's your strategy?
Yeah, so in the old world, we were strictly managed services only. We turned away everything else, didn't take it, wouldn't consider it. In my new company, obviously starting out, I'm definitely willing to take on projects uh, with the hope that they'll lead to managed services. But managed services is where the gold is, right? Like, you know, I mean, I literally was working with a cabling vendor, yesterday, and we were talking about his revenue, and I mean, he'll have a month that's $80,000, and I'll have a month that's 3,000, and I'm like, how do you ever plan for this, And that's what I don't want, right? That's what the recurring revenue fixes, and so we got to get the main goal will always be recurring revenue. That's what we'll be tracking. That's what we'll be focused on. But it never hurts to have a couple projects to fill in the gaps from here, time to time.
Right, for sure, for sure. I've seen that a lot. I think the trend has been, and for many people should and does continue to be, recurring revenue only. And I think that's great. But I think for folks that are still developing at the very least, it's how can we put together a strategy where they'll give us 5 or 10% of their business and we'll earn the rest over time and put them on this roadmap of we're starting here, this is where we want to end up, and just kind of keep those folks in these various stages. I don't think it's the best idea to just say, we'll do a project for anyone anytime. I think it's will they fit into our longer term pipeline to become managed services clients? So yeah, I like what you're saying, Chris. Um, how do you at this stage, make tool selections? We don't have an unlimited budget right now. We know there's some critical ones we need or think we need. How do you kind of tempo in those tools with an emerging budget?
Yeah, so obviously, being in the market for a while, I'm very familiar with what's out there and what kind of tools are out there. I feel like there's kind of two levels of tools. There's the more expensive ones, the ConnectWises of the world, the Kaseya's of the world that are building, and while the per seat price may be low, ultimately when you get in that I guess you'd say architecture, it and you if you really buy all of it, it's not really that cheap anymore. It quickly grows and turns into more. And then I think you've got the lower end, and I'm not saying they're lower end products, but the lower end pricings, the super ops of the world, that, Atera, I can't think of the third one, but, there's a number of those smaller companies that don't have a huge market share, but then price differently, and maybe they price per agent or, like per support agent. And so that's actually the model I'm looking at to start with. I'm going to lead with Atera. Mainly because Atera includes the RMM, all the patching, and they also have the ticketing and invoicing built in with contracts. So it keeps me from having to pay for a ConnectWise right away, Autotask, those kind of things, and yet helps me keep that money down. I mean, it's 140 bucks a month, unlimited agents, and the other side of it is that once you grow and you're kind of big MSP, I know from my perspective, it's like, oh, it's $1 per agent per month, whatever, just put it on there, right? But it's even easier to say that when you're only paying for the tech and you're saying, oh, well, it's truly unlimited. So just put it on everything. And that way, if I need a serial number or if I need to know what part number that is, I've got it. And I'm not picking and choosing going, well, that's not managed or this is managed. And so it's a lot simpler of a process, I think, when you use those types of tools. The other side of it is that starting out, I'm not looking to sign a bunch of contracts, so I want to work with vendors that don't require 3-year contracts, preferably don't require 1-year contracts, and minimums. The minimums have been the other problem. Starting out, a lot of companies have told me, oh, $200 minimum, $300 minimum, and it's like, do you want my business or not? Because I mean, what's it? I mean, I get it, right? There's a cost to invoice, there's a cost to onboard a client, but you know, I can't imagine there's too many MSPs that are coming and getting the software and then going, oh well, I didn't sell any, I left. you know?
Yeah, well, good. It sounds like you've really thought this through because I think it is easy to get sucked into a trap of, especially if you came from somewhere else. Like we had all these things, I don't know how I'll do it without, and we buy a bunch of tools. Oftentimes, just to figure out how we're going to spend our days building our system, as opposed to getting out there and doing the selling like you are actually doing. So good. Chris, having been in the industry a long time, what's broken in our world? What are some fallacies? What are some problems that you see in the way MSP operates that you are hoping to maybe put a little different spin on?
Well, I think the proactive side of things, I think, a lot of companies have used that word and as a sales tool and said, hey, we're proactive. And then come to find out, 2 years in their contract, customers saying this wasn't done, this wasn't done. And you hear this all the time. I mean, I hear it all the time. And so I think, you have to build processes around that. You have to make sure you're doing monthly check-ins, quarterly check-ins on things, and in some cases, daily check-ins. And I think some companies just get so busy with the day-to-day support that they're like, oh, that stuff, I'll get to it later, and they never get to it. So, and I think automation's a big piece. If you can automate and you can kind of summarize, and that way you're only looking at the stuff you really need to look at. I think that's very helpful.
Speaking of automation, what's your outlook on automation in the MSP space over the next 5 or 10 years?
I think you'll see a lot more of it. I mean, that's what I think, your companies like Kaseya, ConnectWise, they're buying up all these other pieces, they're integrating them together, and that's what they're doing, right? They're building these integrations and so that your automations work and so that there's efficiencies. And I can tell you because I came out of that world and, it was really amazing, right? Like I know Kaseya has a bad name and nobody likes to work with them. But, we started as a Datto partner and obviously just kind of got sucked in. But the thing is like, I came from all these disjointed systems that nothing talked. I was constantly saying, okay, let me copy and paste. Every time I have a new client, I got to go create them in 5 different systems. And once they started building out their ecosystem, it was like, okay, I can create it in this main system, and then when I go to these other systems, maybe I have to map it. In some systems, it automatically maps, and it's all done for me. And so now, like, I'm not doing API keys, I'm not tying this stuff together. And I'll tell you, probably my biggest excitement out of all of it was the second that they integrated IT Glue, the documentation platform, into Data RMM. Literally, I didn't have to leave the screen to get a password filled in. Like, it was so nice. And so, that took so much time that where, techs were changing screens and going, oh, I got to look up this password. I mean, literally, you remote into a device, it filters that customer, and then usually, the way we name things, we put our password right at the top. So literally, you just click the button, it fills it in. So that was such a time saver.
So we've got that. We've got the side of the equation of MSPs adopting automation in their business and finding really efficient ways to get things done, get them done better, get them done consistently. How about the other side of the equation where automation is something that MSPs take on the responsibility for their clients, helping that other small business take advantage of automation? Is that a thing? Is there going to have to be another type of organization that comes in to just offer that? What do you think the MSP's role could be or will be in that?
I think the MSP could definitely do it. I think there's already kind of a market happening because of AI. So right now there's a big thing, AI, business optimization, process optimization, that kind of thing, which ultimately is all automation on the back end, right? They're saying, hey, how do I get my invoice to flow from over here to over here and market paid and all these things? So I think ultimately, the MSP, I think there's always people that have the scared tactic of AI is going to replace me, or, AI can do all this for people, so what, they won't need us. I don't worry about that stuff. I look at, like, if that's the case, then I'll be on to the next thing. There's always going to be something to do, and so I think automation and business process optimization is going to be the next thing that MSPs may need to help with. They already touch these systems, they're already familiar with them. If they start working with the Zapiers of the world the N8N, the make.coms, and start saying, hey, I can tie these systems together with no code, the customers are going to go, absolutely, and there's something else you can charge for.
Yeah, I think it's still evolving as to how that riddle gets solved of how do we offer that to our clients? How do we price for it? Where's the recurring revenue play in there? I think it's still kind of being figured out, but it sounds like are you leading with that today, or are you kind of saying I'll kind of lay back a little bit and find my home in it?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily leading with it, but it's definitely an offering that I will add in to any clients looking for that type of work. So I have been doing some of that work, kind of as projects and things, helping businesses locally. So, I'm very familiar with that type of stuff, and I think that that is probably the next thing, but I don't know that that's a dedicated line item to your stack at this point. I don't think you're going to find every customer. And the other side of that is that a lot of software is starting to get better, in my opinion. Right? A lot of companies are building in AI, they're building in document storage, they're building in workflow. And so you don't need all these different tools if you know how to use it. But that's the next thing, right? Customers typically don't know how to use any of that stuff, and they need help with that. So that may be another area. Not that I know most MSPs don't want to be in the training world, but it's still educational content, right? Teaching them how to use some of these things and set them up for their business processes. That may be another opportunity.
It feels like that makes some really interesting marketing as well. Let's have the conversation. Is this enough of a topic that you're even more interested in talking to me or meeting with me? Now, whether we engage in projects along that thread, who knows? But seems like, and I don't know who's talking to them about this. I'm a small business and I'm right next to a bunch of brilliant MSPs all day long, and some of them kind of want to chat with me about AI and automation. But I feel like most of the time I'm driving the conversation because I don't know what they know. I don't know. I don't have the burden of all the technical challenges of things. So my curiosity gets to be very innocent. So I drive that conversation a lot of times with certain folks, and I think a lot of people sound kind of cautiously optimistic the way that you're presenting as well. I'll be real curious when that first moment clicks where somebody says, "Oh shit, they're doing it and they figured it out," and how the market moves against that or with that. Very interesting. All right, Chris. Well, here's what I'm thinking. You're on you're on day, literally, what day are we on? Are we on like day 12, day 30? Where are we at?
Yeah, about. I mean, I've been marketing for probably 30, 45 days, but
Okay.
we've really been launched for about 7 to 8 days.
Okay, great. So 7 to 8 days. What I want to do, and we'll talk offline about this, but I kind of like this idea of checking in with you every couple of months and saying, "All right, Chris, give us the update. Where are we at?" Because I think there's a lot of people who watch this that say, "Oh yeah, I remember day one, I remember day zero, I remember the anxiousness, the fear, the optimism, all of it." And so I think people might be really interested in following you along as you go through this journey. You think that's something we should talk more about?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, it'll be fun because I know you've got a really big goal. If you don't mind, share the big goal of where we're going with this thing.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the end result is to be the largest MSP in the state of Florida.
Hell yeah. Well, anybody from Florida watching this, be on notice right now because it's coming. Well, excellent, Chris. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. Where can people find you today?
So I'm located, online at www.irongatemsp.com, and all my contact information is on there.
Outstanding. What areas do you serve today?
Mostly Orlando, Celebration, Kissimmee. That's my key market right now, and I will plan to expand from there.
Outstanding. Right on, Chris. Thank you for joining us here in
Yep.
the trenches, bud.
Yep. Thank you.